tell me all about Peggy and the life she lived in all of these clothes and whatever you'd like to share.
Okay, well, everybody says she was a force of nature. And she started off as a Bell telephone lady who takes the cord and plugs it in to connect somebody. And she worked there, and then my dad got out of college, and she started doing volunteer work all over with the Girl Scouts, with the Women's Club. She gave classes. She worked for the church. A lot of times back then you couldn't get fresh flowers if you were doing a wedding reception in winter. So she made flower arrangements out of paper and tissue paper so that they could have flower bouquets on the tables. Sometimes she did specialty things like they did sugar plum fairies. So she took a coat hanger and shaped it into a woman standing on one foot, covered it with aluminum foil to resemble a body, put a little skirt on it and wings. So she was creative all along, loved flower arranging, and she started finding out our history, you know, our ancestors. And back then you just couldn't push the computer and, you know, pull it up. You had to write a letter, find out the census report from different towns, and then we would go on road trips on the weekend, and we'd go to those little towns and we'd look for all the graveyards, and so we could do rubbings of the tombstones to see how long they might have been there in that area. And she traced back everything back to the 1740s. The whole top of our family tree is from the 1700s arriving here. So, you know, she went into the DAR because she could trace back the history. We moved a couple different places. When we went to Plumboro, I was riding the bus home from school. She always loved archaeology, National Geographics, you know, tombs, pyramids, you know, exciting. And I raced in the door and I said, they're doing an Indian dig 1 mile away from our house, Carnegie Museum. And so she says, we got in the car and we were there instantaneously. Carnegie Museum was asking for volunteers, so we volunteered and they trained us to do this Native American dig in this farmer's yard, because basically it was now part of the county's park system, and they were going to put a baseball field there in 2 years. But they knew there were a lot of graves there, and so they wanted to have everything removed. I was taking advanced biology, and so I was the perfect one to put together all the bones to make sure we've got all the bodies. One time, it was getting close, winter was coming, it was going to snowstorm, the ground was going to freeze, we knew there was another body. We kept going down and down and down, and this guy was really deep. So the light's getting dim, you know, she pulls the car over, turns on the headlights, and we're hanging upside down trying to remove the skeleton before it freezes. The policeman comes over, and he says, what are you ladies doing? And he's looking down in the hole and sees a skeleton down there. And there was a graveyard for the church that had been there just, you know, maybe 500 feet away. And I looked up at him and I says, I promise you, officer, there's no class ring on this person's finger, you know? So our dining room table after that was always full of pottery and bones. She'd take them home, we'd wash them. They'd be marked and numbered specifically where they came out of the ground. And Carnegie Museum would then take them. And she was there at the ceremony when they were repatriated to the Indian nation. So that was nice. And then from there she went to Hannistown. And we arrived there when there was just a grassy field. And watched the fort go up, watched the house go up, you know. She loved it. It wasn't a pharaoh in Egypt, but it was archaeology. And then she was here at Fort Robideau and Blair Mansion, doing Baker Mansion and doing the style shows, which brought in money to help raise funds. They'd go out all over the place, taking, some people went specific time periods, but most of the time they do from like, you know, the 1720s to maybe the 1800s. But sometimes they wanted to go the whole way up into the 1920s, so kind of flappers. So she made the clothing, most of them. models would come to the house. She'd do fittings. Some of the models actually made their own clothes too, and sometimes they would buy the clothing, the fabric, because they wanted a specific color to be in, so their dress. She loved it. I mean, she was always outgoing, always volunteering. You need a helping hand? Yes, she was there. And I think this donation of an organ was her last great gift.
And she is now a part of history. So obviously history meant so much to her. And now for her to be instilled like that, how does that make you feel?
Extremely proud. It's like the pat on the back, you know, that she really needed for her whole life.
What do you think she would say if she knew that that was going to happen?
She kind of took things, you know, it's just one more thing, you know. She, you know, had drawers full of all of these certificates and awards, and, you know, they were really buried at the bottom underneath family photographs. So it was just, you know, one of those things, and she did it, and she liked it.
So for somebody who had history such a big role in her life and kind of her life, I guess, one of her purposes, I guess, was kind of finding out the past. What do you hope people remember about her legacy?
Always keep looking for the answer. She found some pottery at Hannistown. Nobody knew what it was. She sent letters to manufacturing places in England trying to find us, because you just couldn't pull it up on a computer screen. It was the 60s, you know. So she hunted for about 2 years until she finally identified it was Bonham and Morris, and that Hannistown was the only place that had ever been found other than the manufacturing site at that time. So it was just like she kept hunting for the answers all the time.
Then we're sitting in a room with a bunch of her clothes, and it's just so neat to look at.
She researched and
Yeah.
researched to try to find exactly how it'd be made. I have antique, like 100-year-old books that have pictures in them, you know, drawings in them of how the clothes are put together. And so she just, I mean, just keep looking for the right way. And then she made a couple costumes and they weren't right, and it was just like, you know, throw them out, you know, so we've got to be right. She loved having the kids come, the kids' tours, where they dressed the kids in the outfits to see, you know, so they could see what it was like, the clothing that time, boys in corsets, you know. That was to keep their backs straight so they didn't get curvature, so, yeah.
Wow, that's neat. And then the very chair you're sitting in too is her chair, and she upholstered it. Isn't that cool? Like now you're sitting here and telling her story.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big hug for her.
And I was actually doing some research on her, and I found that we actually interviewed her back in 2019 about the Genealogical Society in Blair County. So we're actually going to use a clip of her in our story today. But what did Blair County mean to her throughout her years in this area?
Her mother was born here. Her mother was a Stanley lady and knew everybody in Altoona. And then she was born here, and I was born here. So it's just like she came back home, you know, after moving, you know, with my father's job. You know, she ended up back here, and I tried to get her to move to Florida, and she wouldn't. I said, Mom, you're in foot of snow, you know. It's warm. There's a lot of old people here.
So now for you, you're coming back home to remember her in a way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what's that going to be like for your family this weekend?
They really don't remember much about this. You know, the nieces, her nieces that are coming, they were here in Evansburg for a short amount of time, but most of their life has been spent in the South. So their mother was from up here, so, you know, they're kind of coming back to her roots too, so, but it's gonna be unusual for them. It's really unusual, so we're gonna try to take them around a couple places real quick.
Yeah, make a trip out of it, sure. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to share that maybe I didn't ask about or something else?
She was always the volunteer. I mean, and she seemed to have leadership qualities because she always ended up being president of something, you know. Even when she, you know, wasn't really trained in something, like Carnegie Museum, you know, they were just, we would go to the meetings all the time of the Archaeology Society, and she was right on their board and all that stuff, and it just, you know, she was a leader and hunting knowledge and always giving.
And that's a a good thing to be remembered for. And now with this record,
Yeah,
you know, it's the oldest known female in the United States too.
I know, and I think that's a shout out to everybody, you know, that you're never too old, you know? You can say that, well, I'm old, you don't know my parts, but really, you know, you could give, you know, even if you're old. I mean, don't discount the fact that, you know, you've got some years, you can still give.
So she signed up then when she was in her 90s?
Or something like that. They said it was, you know, just a couple years, you know, ago, and I was just like, okay, then we're going with the newest thing, you know? And she also changed her mind just recently about being buried and cremated, so she's decided she went to cremation instead. So she had some changes towards the end of her life about, I think it's, you look back at all the bodies that we took out of the ground as archaeologists, you know, maybe she didn't want that happening to her.
And I'm glad I'm getting to talk to you about it today, because that's just such an awesome story, and she seemed like a very great lady.
Yeah, and I said, you know, I don't know what she might have that you could use, you know, and they went through, and they said her liver was good, and I said, and then when I started going through all the pictures that were at the house, here she is in the 1940s, everybody's sitting there with a glass of something at the New Year's Eve party. She has a bottle of Coca-Cola. She never drank, and she never smoked. So a 97-year-old liver was in good condition.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh my gosh, anything else you wanna share? I think
No.
we covered a good bit there.
I just want to, I want to thank you people for, you know, giving her this extra hurrah at the end.